morning, and welcome back to the Channel Insight podcast, where we transform each conversation into actionable insights. I'm your host, Dinara, and today I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by Jay McBain, Chief Analyst at Canalys, and one of the most influential voices in the channel space and tech industry. Welcome to the show, Jay.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
So, Jay, I read your biography blogs with such a great pleasure, and your journey in the tech industry has been remarkable. So, you grew up in Canada, you joined IBM as your first job. Then you moved to the United States in 2009. And the reason I remember is because I moved to the UK in 2009. So there is some commonality between us. And then you have traveled the world. You have so many lovely hobbies. And you've coined numerous concepts that shaped our channel world. And your predictions are absolutely legendary in our industry. My colleagues or guests on the show quote you quite often. So tell me, who is the man behind the legend, and how did you manage to pack so much into your life? And you're also very young.
Yeah, I think the one thing that growing up, I had an accountant as a father and a teacher and then a principal as a mother. But I think more than anything else, I learned that everything has a system. When I was in elementary school, there was kind of a system, to kind of passing. Getting into college, there was a system, succeeding in college, getting into your, chosen field, there was a system, getting an internship, getting into a company over and over in my life, 30 years of a career and now, 50 years of a life, 52 years. I've kind of learned that there's a system underneath everything, and it makes life a lot easier. So many people work harder than they need to. And this is not just a, smarter, not harder type of work thing. It's just they work harder because they're doing things that don't have an outcome, or they're spending time in places that won't be recognized or don't add value to a customer and things like that. So a lot of people that work, 60, 80 hour weeks, it's sometimes that they haven't spent an extra moment. Malcolm Gladwell in The Tipping Point called it sharpening the saw.
Mm-hmm.
If you just figure out kind of with the end in mind, that was a 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, work with the end in mind, but you kind of think about your customer, you think about what you're delivering, think about where you are in your life and work backwards at a certain point. Then you can kind of reframe it. Like, do I need to do this? Do I have to do this? Is it urgent? And I think that was one thing that maybe differentiated. It helps me a lot as an analyst as well. I can cut through trillions of dollars, and every day, we have a damage report, what's happening in our industry. AI, has moved us into like a day is like a year. The internet was like a month was like a year. So how do you cut through the noise and clutter? Focus on what's important and deliver the most value possible in the limited time that we should be working.
It's really interesting, and I particularly like the fact that you use the Excel spreadsheet to create your network of influencing people or the people who you admire. That's really good. So I wanted to pick your brain around the 2025 MSP Prediction Report, which Canalys launched just last week, and it's full of fascinating insights. You talk about convergence of cloud marketplaces, distributors, the AI agentic era, and whatnot. And there are a lot of things to unpack, obviously, from this report. So let's explore this scenario. So if I am the CEO of an established MSP, what should my key focus area be in 2025? Where and how should I prioritize my investments? Where should I invest more into? Or any strategic initiatives that should top my agenda?
Yeah. So this kind of goes back to my opening statement of, the system. A lot of MSP owners, I know a lot of them and I'm friends, and I've grown up for 25 years kind of in this market. Most of my personal friends own MSPs. But the system, as an analyst, I get to go and, explore the, $105 trillion world economy or the $5.4 trillion. No MSP owner is going to like dabble, in kind of what the trillions are or waste time in that area. But there's a kind of a working with the end in mind.
Mm-hmm.
I would be kind of obsessed with how that breaks down to me. If I serve a 50-mile radius, for example, I serve a town, a city, a province, a state, whatever it is, a country, I'd want to break that down. Jay, you say there's $1 trillion in hardware, there's $1 trillion in software, there's $3 trillion in services. all the little pie, tell me about all the subsections of that. And then I want to break it down to my customer base. I'm focused on a certain set of buyers. I'm focused on a certain set of industries, perhaps. I'm focused on a certain set of segments on top of the geography. I'm expert in certain product areas. Obviously, a business model like managed services, but there's other business models. But there's 6 questions that I can get $5.4 trillion of global spend in our industry down to perhaps the $100 million opportunity that I can go grab, 10% of my fair share. And so I'd want to double click, what's happening in each of these categories this year. Oh, AI is growing at 59% compounded in services.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what are those services? Well, they break down into 4 areas. What would I have to do to build skills, build a practice, go and get, again, my fair share of how that breaks down in front of my customer? So this is target addressable, now serviceable addressable. And then what I'm talking about here is serviceable obtainable market. There's TAM, SAM, and SOM.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'd want to go after and build a trifecta of parts that are growing faster than the industry. So the world economy is growing at 2.6% in 2025. The tech industry is growing over 3 times larger than that, 8.2%. We're in a great industry. But now I want to choose things that are growing faster than that. For example, managed services at 610 billion this year globally is growing at 13%. It's 1.5 times larger than the SaaS industry. It's 1.5 times larger than the hyperscalers combined. It's a wonderful industry, and it's growing at 13%. Managed security, for example, is growing at 15%.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm doubling an industry growth that's already tripling the world growth. So for all the customers I sell to and all my neighbors and friends, I can build a business that's growing at 5 or 6x what the kind of world economy is.
Mm-hmm.
So then I'm focused on all the different areas. So now I talked about cyber, I talked about managed services, I talked about AI. What is my trifecta and where am I going to go spend time this year? Well, look at that. PCs, for example, which are kind of a boring business. I sold PCs for 17 years, but we have a whole glut, a lump in the snake of PCs that were delivered during COVID. We all had to go home with a laptop. All those are 4 years old. Microsoft just ended support for Windows 10 in October, which is always a cycle. And then third is everybody's replacing it with more expensive AI capable PCs that we learned about at CES a couple of weeks ago. So that's itself kind of a trifecta just happening in one market. And a boring PC market is now growing at double digits in some areas going into 2025. So maybe I'm going to do a little bit more there to go make sure that everyone in my customer base has a plan and I'm on the front end of that. Whether I sell them or not, but I want to make sure that every one of those is connected to a new managed contract.
Absolutely. Go and get and deliver. Yeah, I love it. Also, talking about different priorities, what was mentioned in the MSP prediction report was that the APAC will show 15% growth compared to low rates in EMEA and North America. So, would your advice be go and expand to APAC? This is where the growth is heading towards. And also, do you know why there is such a difference, regional difference between different markets like North America and APAC? What is driving this growth in APAC?
Yeah. So 2 things is, no, I would not jump on an expansion plan in Asia Pacific, partially because 99% of MSPs are not at the point of expanding into another country, into another region. It makes no sense. There's so much business locally that in that market TAM that I talked about, the SAM and the SOM, I would just go build, rather than some galactic strategy, I would just go get more of my fair share of things within my focus area, my industry, my geo, my buyer type, et cetera, my segment that I'm in. So no, it's not that. For very large public companies, sure, you could explore, partner types across Asia, but the answer to your question is just time. Managed services really started in North America. The RMM companies kind of came out of Canada, out of the old Nortel. The PSAs came out of Tampa, Albany, New York, and Omaha back then, 1999. And it was, 90% North American. And all the companies, Autotask and ConnectWise and TigerPaw, had salespeople that would dial into the UK and stay up late and dial into Australia and stuff. And, I was there at Autotask when we hired the first 100 people in the UK. I was there when we decided to put, boots on the ground in Australia and become a global company. But that was after $20 million in revenue. Like this was at a significant size expansion, and it made sense at that point. But suffice it to say, Europe came next. It was about 10 years behind North America to start to take a significant share of this massive managed services market, as I said. And then Asia Pacific followed behind that by 5 years. So the growth that you're seeing, and by the way, 15% in a world that's growing at 2 is a ridiculous growth rate. And it's just catching up to the world because 82% of customers now outsource some or all of their IT, and they're doing it at a pace more in 2025 than they did at 2024. Services are outgrowing products. So partners, MSPs, are outgrowing the vendors that they represent in the market, which is kind of great news. And there's always going to be a geographic split in terms of catch up, in terms of saturation of market. And Asia happens to be, the one that's growing the fastest because it was kind of the latest to the market.
Yeah, wow, interesting. I was just thinking maybe it has something to do with the economy and the culture and maybe some regulations that are favorable for MSPs in Asia. All right, it kind of leads me nicely to my next question. So if I look at this report from the vendor's point of view, not as an MSP, and a lot of my colleagues, again, they work for vendors. What do you think a vendors should do as a first thing to capitalize on all these current trends based again on your report? And I'm also interested to delve a little bit into details around the partner program. I see there is a trend where it's kind of moving towards a point-based system partner program for MSPs. So I'd like to understand what can we as a vendor offer to MSPs so the programs can be lucrative and appealing to those MSPs.
Yeah. So for example, it's a very noisy market in MSP vendor marketing.
Mm-hmm.
By my count, there's 35,000 vendors who are trying to knock on the door of every one of the 341,000 companies that have at least one managed contract. I'm not calling them MSPs until they hit, a certain level. But trust me, it's over 300,000 companies now that are dabbling or established in managed services. So you've got a ratio of about 35,000 trying to get to 340. So it's a 1-to-10 ratio there. And you can imagine the amount of inbound activity at the average MSP. Every time they go to one of the 270 shows, every time they open up one of the 146 social groups or the 121 podcasts or the 106 magazines, the 1,000 watering holes, there is a glut of vendor activity trying to explain. So I'll explain it in cybersecurity. Cyber is a $97 billion vendor market, TAM, and there's 6,500 MSP facing vendors trying to get their slice of the pie. The good news is MSPs sell $2 for every one of those dollars. So the overall market is $282 billion, but vendors are growing in cyber for example, at 11% this year. Services around cyber grow at 13%, and the managed security services grow at 15%. So, here's a chance where partners, with the right skills, with the right practices, with the right marketing and all the other things can grow much faster than the vendor market. Mm-hmm. And vendors have to realize that one of the things you brought up was programmatic. Mm-hmm. And I just spent an hour this morning with Cisco, who announced their new point system coming out next February. I just spent an hour yesterday with Microsoft, who shook up the market 2.5 years ago with their point system. But the number one thing MSPs are now asking vendors is to be measured outside of the transaction. We've been yelling for a long time that we're not cash registers and don't treat us like resellers. But for 43 years, the economics of partnering all come around the point of sale. To get access to, back-end margins, market development funds, and any kind of new customer bonuses and front-end margins and everything else, you have to take the customer's money. But nowadays on marketplaces, we think about half of those deals will be funded by 2027. In other words, private offers, multi-partner offers, distributor sellers of record. So it doesn't mean you have to carry the money. You don't have to take the money. As a managed service provider, it's something you actually don't really want to do. It doesn't add to your financials. It doesn't add to your profitability. What you want to do is do what you've always done. Early on, the consulting, the design, the architecture, configuration, pricing, quoting, building around the solution, the 7-layer solution, and then implementing, integrating, and managing. So there's hundreds of services that are profitable, that are sticky, that are delighting the customer, that don't involve being a cash register. And so what MSPs are asking vendors for, and now Cisco and Microsoft are two big examples of companies that have changed over to this new system. Resell is going to be at 3%. And the other 20% margin is going to come and complement what you do. If you co-sell with us, if you co-market with us, if you co-innovate or co-develop, if you co-keep, which a managed service provider is built to do, we're going to spread all that resell money like peanut butter. You're going to earn points through all these hundreds of services. And you could be a gold partner, top end partner, without ever selling a nickel, which is the outcome that most, I'm going to say, mature, smart MSPs are asking every vendor for.
Wow. When you said Cisco, I'm like, oh my God, this is where I started my career at Cisco 20 years ago. So I love this company. So now you talked a bit about the relationship of MSP and the vendor. I hope it's safe to say that we do live in the AI era now, right? With the emergence of agentic AI. Is there any influence from AI to change the relationship between the MSPs and the vendors, seeing the prevalence of agentic AI? You say in your MSP prediction report that there will be the dominance of agentic AI in 2025 is actually the year of agentic AI.
Yeah, so this is going to be an answer that you're not expecting. MSPs over the last 25 years, remember the MSP market started almost the exact same time as the SaaS market. So Salesforce.com got their start in 1999. Autotask got their start in 1999. That's when ConnectWise started pulling everything together and the RMM started to get more mature. So if we call that a start date, we started at the same time. So we've been in this 25-year cycle together. It couldn't be more opposing, as MSPs have failed over those 25 years and SaaS vendors have failed over those 25 years to come together to succeed. There's never been a better together. MSPs, succeeded in the 20-year client server era. Had a trouble from 1999 in through 2011 when AWS started consumption. But in subscription consumption, which you think managed services would be perfectly built around because it's recurring every 30-day kind of revenue.
Yeah.
Services around it are perfectly operational and sit under the same OpEx budget. It would just be a natural that every dollar of SaaS, triggers, perhaps upwards of $6 or $7, which they do, of services that would be best delivered by an MSP. But here we are 25 years later, and SaaS is one of the weaknesses in the MSP market. We don't earn enough money around Salesforce, ServiceNow, Workday, Marketo, NetSuite, HubSpot. I could rip through all 250,000. Unless there's SaaS companies in cybersecurity or backup recovery or more IT related. And that's the reason why. 75% of SaaS is sold to line of business buyers. Yeah. MSPs never over the time of managing a client really got in tight with the head of sales, head of marketing, head of operations, head of HR, head of finance, all the people that buy up 75% of $420 billion worth of SaaS. And now to agent AI, 90% of agent AI is going to run around SaaS. Salesforce is charging $2 per conversation. Zendesk is charging $1 per outcome, per resolution, per photo retouched. We have thousands of SaaS companies that have now introduced agentic AI and the pricing model, which is now micro consumption. This doesn't really fit in MSP because it's not every 30-day subscription. It's $1 for everything. And SaaS pricing is going to be reduced and consumption, micro consumption is going to increase. I know the SaaS companies are hoping that it just adds on and they get double the money from every client, and it's just not going to happen. As every dollar of agentic AI is spent, they're going to ask for 50 cents or 75 cents in savings on the subscription. So over the next 10 to 20 years, the MSP has to get closer to the lines of business, get closer to the business outcomes, not just the IT, which is doing the cybersecurity, kind of the federal government, compliance, regulatory, backups, cybersecurity, all that kind of important stuff. Unless you get into the business and into those business conversations, you're going to miss a 20-year era kind of like we missed the 20-year cloud era.
Wow.
Very important.
Profound. That's profound. And actually, admire your memory in terms of numbers and years. So I want to bring you back to this historical comparison. In 2011, I worked at Adobe and I was deeply involved in the transition from perpetual licensing to subscription model. And we know what it caused. You actually, I think, coined the name for this. A decade of subscription economy am I right? You coined ecosystem, and so now my question is, as we're entering this AI era, do you think this technological shift will have even a much more major impact on the partner ecosystem? What will AI actually do, in your view or in your opinion, on the overall partner ecosystem? I mean, we're already seeing some mergers, acquisitions. We already see agentic AIs talking to each other. But is there something else that maybe I've missed or I can't figure out myself?
Yeah, we used to talk, we used to make fun that the internet, every month was like a year. That's how accelerated it was. I used to think, maybe a couple of months ago that every week in AI was like a year. But just look in the last 2 weeks, Stargate, $500 billion was last week. But this week we have the DeepSeek out of China and the disruption of NVIDIA. So it's almost every day now seems like a year in AI. So it's moving fast, but to oversimplify, again, back to the system of AI. Forget about the daily news and, what NVIDIA stock price did yesterday and how much Mark Zuckerberg's going to buy, today. And, all the, Elon Musk becoming a trillionaire and all the, kind of the consumer news. As business owners, we got to kind of get underneath the covers is the system. The March of 2023, the ChatGPT consumer trend, as every business knows in tech, wasn't the start of AI. I was at IBM when we played Garry Kasparov in 1996. First computer to ever beat a grandmaster. A grandmaster of chess has never beat a computer since. It was 11 years later that we played Jeopardy and took down Ken Jennings and all the, celebrities of Jeopardy. And that was a generative AI problem. That wasn't a brute force play chess problem or play Go. This was now, I have to go read the internet cover to cover. I get milliseconds to press the button. And then I have to frame it in the form of a question, back to Alex Trebek. I only get 4 seconds to read the internet cover to cover and come back with a question. So that was generative AI, but that was like 2011. That was 13, 14 years ago. So now fast forward today. Now all our neighbors and friends, see the poetry, the music, the deep fakes. They're asking us as tech people, did we just light up Skynet? When does Arnold Schwarzenegger come back and start shooting everything up? Because I think we're done for as humanity. And we had to come up with an answer in March of 2023 pretty fast. But we're coming up to the 2-year anniversary of the consumer trend. In 1996, Bill Gates said, we overestimate what's going to happen in 2 years, and we underestimate what's going to happen in 10. The first generation of business AI that seems to be sticking is agentic AI. There's been almost no movement in the next phase of AI. And the next phase, and this is the big phase, and this is the managed services huge win over the course of the next decade, is when our relationships with our banks, our governments, our airlines, everything changes. Our co-pilots start talking to their co-pilots, and the world gets so automated that we lose the front ends of most of the SaaS tools. We lose a lot of the apps on our phone. The deep integration that our life has behind the scenes with every other industry, 27 other industries, and how we work our personal and professional lives is the promise of AI. It's a $7 trillion build out of infrastructure to go get that done. The world economy is 105. So that's 7% of the world economy is the cost of building this.
I know.
Suffice it to say, we're in this phase now of, hey, can we take what used to be RPA, robotic process automation, workflows, processes, business logic, and can we connect the dots and get things more automated? But now it's at the next level. The automation isn't just connecting dots. It's a system that understands the dots and can put together the dots that we can't even see. So it takes it to the next level to say, we can start replacing humans, not just human tasks, but humans, with these models. But it's going to create new jobs in other places. So we're not talking about an eradication of all jobs. It's just, it's a completely different way of thinking. But that's agent AI, and it's going to really work out of the SaaS world. If you're an MSP and you're not tight today with Salesforce, ServiceNow, Workday, HubSpot, or somebody, and you're not tight with the CMO, the CRO, you're not going to win in agent AI. Now, for the next phase, a $7 trillion build out, every business is going to have to rethink its customer service, its marketing, but then it has to rethink its very core function. Industries are going to go away because of this. And so that's the bigger trend here that's life changing. And it's the next 20 years. And if I'm going into the client server era, in 1981, if I'm going into the cloud era, I want to be early on learning as much as I can on podcasts like this. I want to be connecting the dots to people that have vision. And I want to be building out a business that's future friendly and not just focused on past opportunity.
Very good. Thank you so much, Jay. That's exactly why I created this podcast, to learn from you. So, as we wrap up, is there anything exclusive you can tell me and my audience, or is there anything we haven't heard from you as a final thought?
Yeah, I mean, I think the hand that we've been dealt, I mentioned that services are outgrowing the products, but we're in an industry growing 3 times faster than the world economy. And that's not just in 2025. The next 10 years, we have a new buyer starting January, who's now a millennial, majority buyer of that $5 trillion. They're digital first, they're digital only, but the criteria changed. They're integration first. 79% of people won't buy a car unless it has CarPlay or Android Auto. So in this new world, integrations with all 27 industries are going to create unbelievable opportunity for MSPs to be able to operationalize that, to serve a new FinOps type of buyer, financial ops type of buyer, and to outgrow the world for at least the next 10 to 20 years. It doesn't matter how long you have in your career left. It's going to be, you've been dealt a really, really good hand. And now it's just time to play the hand.
It means we're living in the right place at the right time. Thank you, Jay. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.